What's up guys, Phoenix here. Sorry for the lack of videos over the last couple of days, but life has just been getting in the way for me. I've been a little bit busy, and overall just shit happens, as I'm sure many of you can relate to, besides just myself. But ultimately, this video is going to be a Majespecter deck profile, specifically on the Majespecter deck that I was using in the duel videos that went up a few days back. Now I do have another deck built of Majespecters that is my own personal build, that has a little bit more relevant theory and testing rooted into it, but overall I don't feel like I'm ready to profile that yet, as I still have a couple of things I'm trying to work out with the deck. But once it gets to a point that I feel comfortable enough with it to put it out there, and I feel like perfectly fine and proud of it and whatever, then I'm going to make a profile of it itself. But this is specifically for the people that wanted to see the specific build I was playing in my duel videos that went up a few days back. Now, a couple minor changes need to be made to this deck. Overall, you can be the judge of what you want to cut and whatnot. This was basically a very basic build that I just kind of tweaked around with and just played around with when I was trying to gain a more in-depth knowledge of how this deck functions and operates. And it was also pre-YCS San Jose, so there was a lot of results from that weekend that did not go into being factored into theory when putting this together and thinking about card choices and stuff like that. But overall, if you wanted to enter an event like a local or a regional with this deck, you probably would do just fine, because this deck is insanely absurd at how it handles its business in terms of the monsters having immunity, as well as its spells and traps all being really good. There's a lot of different factors that go into it, but overall, just you could go into an event with this deck with minor tweaks. Personally, I probably wouldn't, without making it have a higher trap count or something like that, or just playing my other build, because my other build has a lot more of a different approach to it, and I really like that approach better than this one. But overall, the deck list for this is one copy of Unicorn, and this is probably the worst card in the deck. I just wanted to test it. I really like it, but I only like it when it's able to be Pendulum Summoned, so this card is probably going to be having more playability when we get the Magician Pendulum cards, because then there's a bit of a hybrid that you can build with this deck and the Magician Pendulum deck, and this card functions as another trap in that regard. But until then, I mean, you could probably just cut it. It doesn't really do much in this deck outside of you having to normal summon it, and that's always the worst feeling in the world. But anyway, carrying on, triple Fox, triple Crow, triple Bunbuku, and double Cat. Triple Luster Pendulum, the Draco Slayer. This is easily the best card in your deck outside of Majesty's Pegasus and Bunbuku, just because they're the cards that allow you to get more things going, and this fuels your extra deck with Pendulum monsters to allow you to get quick plays moving very, very aggressively, I guess you could say. And also the fact that it allows you access into Ignister to spin threats in the form of Forerunner and Dark Destroyer and things like that without targeting them. A lot of different factors go into play to make this card really good, and overall, it's by far my favorite card in this entire deck in terms of the way it functions. Every time I see an opening hand with this card in it, I'm always pleasantly pleased about the situations that can come up with it. But anyway, one Arch Phoenix Centric, just because I didn't want it to clog, and then a bit of an oddball pick. I just kind of put this in here for testing purposes, and I didn't dislike it, but it was just very subpar. Basically, this Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon was meant to replace the third copy of Cat, because in essence, they're both the exact same card, except this doesn't take up your normal summon. And also, if you ever had to try and resolve double Cat in the same turn, if one of those cats was a Pendulum Dragon instead, you could actually resolve both, and I thought that would come up. But it also just functioned as an additional copy of all the Majespecter cards, but then a second copy of Arch Phoenix Centric, in theory. But you can't Pendulum Summon it back out, which makes it basically not an actual resource. And it's basically just as slow as running another Cat, but you don't get the benefits of Cat being a Majespecter card that can be Pendulum Summoned for free, tributed for your trap cards, or tributed off with Majesty's Pegasus. So it just overall probably the second card in the deck that would get cut behind Unicorn if you wanted to play this deck in an actual event. But I mean, I didn't dislike it how it functioned, because it basically was just a Cat. If I disliked how Pendulum Dragon worked, then I dislike how Cat works in terms of how it searches the rest of these cards, and it does give an additional access in Arch Phoenix Centric without having to play a second copy. But overall, just really, really lackluster, and like I said, should probably be cut if you wanted to play this specific build at an event. But you can make that decision for yourself if you decide to test this specific build. But for the spells, triple Majesty's Pegasus, this field spell is insane. It lets you get all your Majespecter names in circulation really quickly, while also fueling your extra deck with more Pendulum monsters. It's basically a field spell version of Luster Pendulum, except it allows you a lot more flexibility and user-friendliness, because instead of getting the same name, you can get a different name, and it just starts going crazy from there in terms of the amount of snowballing you can do. This card, alongside Luster Pendulum as well, also makes it to where like you can just start throwing your Pendulum monsters into back row, and it doesn't matter if they get warninged or grand horned or anything like that, because as long as you have access to one Majespecter name, while having the field spell and Luster Pendulum and your resource pool of accessible cards, you can refuel your extra deck with all your names again, because this gives you access into Bambunku, which gives you access into any of these guys, and then Luster Pendulum doubles it in the term of its name. Like, there's a lot of different factors that go into it, and by your next turn, you can easily just have all your names back into circulation again. So it makes it very low risk playing into back row that might negate your Pendulum summons when you have this as well as Luster Pendulum at your fingertips in terms of resources. But carrying on, triple chicken game just to give overlap with terraformings, because you always want one of the Majesty's Pegasuses, but you never want multiples. But it's such a good field spell that you want to play like the maximum amount you can, so triple terraform and triple Majesty's Pegasus. So chicken game is just another card, whereas if you opened double terraformings or Majesty's Pegasus in terraforming or two, or chicken game in a terraforming, it's just a lot of overlap that will allow you to turn those terraformings or chicken games into additional cards before you play Majesty's Pegasus on top of it. That's just a little bit of overlap that I've definitely carried over into further builds, just maybe with lesser copies of chicken game going into those. But anyway, triple Wavering Eyes, just because, like, even if you're not playing against Pendulum decks, this card is still amazing for allowing you to set up your Pendulum cards in your extra deck quickly, and having easy access into R2 and Eccentric as well as Luster Pendulum, the two only actual like heavily accessible cards in the deck. And Luster Pendulum being your best card, you obviously want to get into it. Wavering Eyes, it's amazing if you're playing a mirror match, and it's great game one if you're playing a mirror, but even if you're not playing a mirror, you can easily just load up a bunch of cards into Wavering Eyes, and that gives you extra accessibility into Luster Pendulum, getting you the tuner. Like, you can just get a lot of different things going with this Wavering Eyes. Now, it may seem like a really low monster count in terms of what you'd be trying to do with Wavering Eyes, but again, it's perfectly fine, because the way this deck operates is that once you get one monster and like access to Luster Pendulum or the field spell, it starts snowballing into more monsters that you can use Wavering Eyes with. So it's a lot of different factors that went into it, but ultimately I haven't been having a problem with through Wavering Eyes. And if you're playing against any Pendulum deck, you can just punish them with Wavering Eyes. If you ever Wavering Eyes can clear 4 zones, 2 of your own and 2 of your opponents, like, it's basically just an auto win at that point, because you get another Wavering Eyes, and then you get to banish a card, and then you just get another Pendulum monster. Like, it's absolutely ludicrous. This card is absolutely insane in terms of how much it counteracts Pendulums while also fueling Pendulums. Pendulum-based strategies like have an amazing card in the form of Wavering Eyes, and I could see this card being on the Forbidden and Limited list at some point in the future at either 1, 2 copies, maybe even banned, just because of the fact that if Konami's trying to push Pendulums, this card both benefits them, but then it is also an opposing threat. And if your opponent has a Wavering Eyes and you don't, and they can resolve it, they are at such an advantage over you that it's not even funny. But anyway, a copy of Raigeki just to be a power card, and then 2 copies of Majespecter Cyclone. Majespecter Storm kind of sucks, just because it's not a quick play. If it was a quick play, it would easily be better than Cyclone because it spins rather than destroy. But I mean, this basically is just, very rarely do you ever actually use this card for full benefit. You usually use it to bait things. But, I mean, it just gives you something to get a plus with off of Crow, while also allowing Crow to be a level 4 to be relevant elsewhere. But, anyway, the traps I'm running, triple copies of Tempest and triple Tornado. I'd probably cut Tornado down to 2, simply because Cyclone does the exact same thing. I have the hiccups a bit. And then 1 copy of Emptiness and 1 copy of Warning. For the extra deck, the only cards that really matter are like 2 copies of Ignister and then 1 copy of Magister Paladin, because those are usually the only cards you're ever going to be making, other than like Trapeze Magician, Ptolemaeus Diamond against like certain matchups. But other than that, the rest of these cards almost never get made. Maybe Totem Bird every once in a while, but usually that's like a seal the deal type of card, like, because the rest of your cards already have built-in immunity to spells and traps, or at least most of them in the known game. Totem Bird is just one of those cards you usually make before you're going to go into like Ignister, so that this provides protection for the Ignister, since it doesn't have any built-in protection for itself and then you're going in for like a game shot or something like that. Lightning Chidori, even though it's in here, I rarely find myself making it because the deck is just so good at clearing threats by itself already, that very rarely do you ever make Lightning Chidori where you couldn't just make Ignister. Chidori is basically a card that you make if you don't have Luster Pendulum in circulation and the ability to make Ignister. That's basically all it's here for. But the rest of these cards are just all very like niche for situations. I mean, you can just play whatever you want. Like you saw in the videos that I was playing this deck with, it had like a 10 or 11 card extra deck, and like it was just cards I threw in there. It was basically the only cards I cared about were the 2 Ignisters, the Majespecter Paladin, and then like a Diamond Dyer and an Emerald and shit like that. Like it was just overall just, it wasn't that important because the way this deck operates, it's able to just win without touching the extra deck if you don't have to, but it does have accessibility into the extra deck, which is really neat and very niche when it needs to come up. But overall, that is the deck list. For those of you that wanted it, if you have any questions about this deck list, definitely leave a comment down below and I will try to address it, or maybe someone else can address it just as well as I could in terms of how the question is structured. But anyway, as always guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that nonsense. Like the video to support my content and channel's growth now as well as in the future. Links are in the description as usual to both my Facebook pages if you want to connect with me, chat with me, whatever. Definitely check those out. Click an ad if you have not. I greatly appreciate it. Helps me make money. There's no reason to lie to you guys about that. If you have to disable ad block to click an ad, please do. It takes seconds out of your day and it helps me out more than you could ever know. You just got to take the ad block off for a couple seconds, refresh the video, click an ad or 2 if you want, and then put the ad block back on when you're done. It helps me out more than you could ever know, and I would be greatly appreciative of you if you would do so. But as I said, if you have any questions about this deck, leave them in the comments down below. Try to address them as best I can, as well as I know some other people would be more than willing to chime in for discussion points as all that. But other than that, that is all for this video, and as always guys, take care.